May I stay with you again tonight? The alien servant pleaded softly. The storm had been raging for 3 hours when Darren heard the sound. It wasn't thunder. He knew thunder intimately after 5 years as keeper of Thornwick Lighthouse. This was different. A metallic screech followed by a distant crash that made the windows rattle in their frames. He pulled on his weathered jacket and grabbed the heavy flashlight, stepping out into the howling wind. The beam of light swept across the rocky cliff path, illuminating sheets of rain and wind-bent grass. Then it caught something that made his breath stop. A figure collapsed against the stone wall near his door, barely 20 feet from where he stood. Darren rushed forward, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The woman, it had to be a woman, despite everything, was curled on her side, her clothing torn and scorched. But her skin was a deep, luminous purple, like twilight given form. Long black wavy hair plastered against her face and shoulders, darker than the storm-swept night. "Jesus," he breathed, kneeling beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, large, expressive eyes that held both fear and desperate hope. She tried to speak, but only a weak sound emerged. Training overrode shock. Darren scooped her up, surprised by how light she felt, and carried her inside. He laid her carefully on the worn sofa near the fireplace, then stoked the dying embers back to life. The growing warmth cast dancing shadows across her unusual features. Up close, he could see the burns along her left side, the cuts across her arms. He retrieved his first aid kit with trembling hands, his mind racing through impossible explanations. Alien. She had to be alien. But she was here, injured and vulnerable, and that was what mattered. As he cleaned her wounds with gentle efficiency, her eyes followed his movements. There was intelligence there, and something else, gratitude mixed with disbelief, as if kindness was foreign to her. "Thank you," she whispered finally, her accent strange and lilting. "I escaped. Ship crashed. They were cruel." "You're safe now," Darren assured her, though his heart hammered. "I'm Darren. What's your name?" "VYX." The word was barely audible. She winced as he bandaged her side, but didn't pull away. Instead, she studied his face with those remarkable eyes, as if memorizing every feature. He made her tea, which she accepted with shaking hands. The storm continued to rage outside, but the lighthouse felt like a sanctuary removed from the world. VYX sipped slowly, color gradually returning to her violet features. When he offered her the spare bedroom, she shook her head, fear flashing across her face. "Please," she said softly, her voice barely above the crackling fire. "May I stay with you again tonight? I do not want to be alone." The phrasing struck him as odd, again suggesting familiarity they didn't have. But Darren saw only her vulnerability, her need for safety. "Of course," he said gently. "I'll sleep in the chair. You take the sofa." Something like wonder crossed her face. "You are kind," she whispered, as if the word itself was precious. As VYX's eyes finally closed in exhausted sleep, Darren sat in his chair, watching the impossible woman who had fallen from the sky into his lonely life, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Morning light filtered through the lighthouse windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Darren woke to find VYX already awake, standing by the window and staring at the ocean with an expression of wonder. "I have never seen so much water," she said quietly, not turning around. "On my world, before they took me, we had only small lakes." Over breakfast, simple eggs and toast that VYX consumed with evident hunger, she told him fragments of her story. She had been taken young, sold into servitude on a trade vessel. Her masters had been harsh, treating her as property rather than a person. The crash had been her first taste of freedom in years. "I should clean," she said suddenly, standing and reaching for his plate. "I should earn my place here." VYX, no. Darren caught her hand gently. "You're recovering. You're a guest, not a servant." She stared at their touching hands as if the contact burned. "I do not understand. Everyone wants something. I want you to rest and heal. That's all." The concept seemed to baffle her, but over the following days, she began to tentatively believe it. She helped around the lighthouse not from obligation but from genuine desire to contribute. Darren taught her to operate the light mechanism, showed her his small library, shared meals with her as an equal. He learned that VYX was curious about everything. She asked endless questions about Earth, about humanity, about why he lived alone in such isolation. He found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years, telling her about Margaret, his wife who had died from cancer 3 years ago, about choosing solitude to nurse his grief. "You understand loss," VYX said one evening as they sat by the fire. The cuts on her arms had healed to faint scars against her purple skin. "This makes you gentle." "Maybe," Darren admitted. "Or maybe just tired." "Not tired. Waiting." She tilted her head, her black wavy hair cascading over one shoulder. "You were waiting for something to change." The words settled between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. That night, they discovered a shared love of music. Darren pulled out his old record player and a collection of blues and jazz. VYX had never heard anything like it. When a slow, soulful melody filled the room, he offered his hand on impulse. "May I teach you to dance?" She placed her hand in his with unexpected trust. He showed her the basic steps, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. She was graceful, learning quickly, but it was the closeness that undid them both. The music wrapped around them like a spell. Darren became acutely aware of every detail, the faint floral scent of her hair, the warmth of her skin through the borrowed shirt she wore, the way she looked up at him with those expressive eyes. They had stopped moving, simply standing together, swaying almost imperceptibly. "Darren," she whispered, "I feel strange. Like my heart is too large for my chest." "I know," he breathed. "I feel it too." When he leaned down and she rose on her toes, the kiss was inevitable. Soft, tentative, exploring. VYX made a small sound of surprise and wonder, her fingers tightening on his shoulder. They broke apart, both breathing hard. "I should not," VYX said, but didn't step back. "You saved me. I do not want you to think." "This isn't about obligation," Darren said firmly. "Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me you don't feel this, and we'll never speak of it." She searched his face, then slowly smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "May I stay with you again tonight?" she asked, but this time the question carried different weight, different meaning. His answer was another kiss, deeper this time, full of promise. 3 weeks had passed since that first kiss, and the lighthouse had transformed from a place of solitude into something that felt remarkably like home. VYX had blossomed in ways Darren couldn't have imagined. The frightened, submissive woman who had collapsed at his door now laughed freely, debated with him about books, and had developed a passion for painting the seascapes she saw from the windows. Her confidence grew daily, fed by his consistent respect and affection. They had been careful with each other, both aware of the fragility of what was growing between them. But the tension built like a gathering storm, every accidental touch, every lingering glance, every night they parted to separate beds felt like denial of something fundamental. It was a Tuesday afternoon, grey and drizzling, when everything changed. VYX had been painting while Darren read, the comfortable silence between them broken only by the soft patter of rain. She made a frustrated sound, and he looked up to find her frowning at her canvas. "What's wrong?" "I cannot capture the color of the water correctly. See?" She gestured him over. "It should feel alive, but it looks flat." Darren moved behind her, looking over her shoulder at the painting. It was actually quite good, she had natural talent, but he could see what she meant. Without thinking, he reached around her, guiding her hand with his. "Try layering. Start with the darker shade, then add highlights." But his words trailed off as he became aware of their position, his chest against her back, his arms encircling her, her black wavy hair soft against his cheek. She had gone very still. "VYX," he murmured. She turned in his arms, and the paintbrush clattered forgotten to the floor. "I cannot pretend any more," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Every night I lie alone and wish for your touch. Is this wrong? Am I misunderstanding what this feeling means?" "No." He cupped her face gently, his thumbs stroking across her purple cheeks. "You're not wrong. I've been holding back because I didn't want you to feel pressured." She kissed him, cutting off his words, And this time there was no hesitation. The kiss deepened, grew heated, as weeks of restrained longing finally broke free. His hands tangled in her hair, her fingers clutched at his shirt. "Please," she breathed against his mouth. Show me what it means to be touched with care." They moved to his bedroom, every step punctuated with kisses and whispered reassurances. Darren took his time, treating her with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. He learned the landscape of her body, every curve, every sensitive place, while she discovered the power of her own desire. VYX was overwhelmed by the gentleness. "In my world," she whispered as he traced patterns across her skin, "I was taught I existed to serve. That my body was not my own. But you ask permission. You watch my face. You care if I feel pleasure." "Always," Darren promised, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "This is about both of us, together. Equal." When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that transcended physical pleasure. VYX cried, not from pain but from the overwhelming experience of being cherished. Darren held her through it, moving slowly, letting her set the pace, murmuring endearments against her skin. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, the rain still falling outside. VYX traced idle patterns on his chest, her expression peaceful in a way he'd never seen. "I never knew it could be like this," she said softly. "I never knew I could feel so whole." Darren kissed the top of her head, his heart full. "Stay with me. Not just tonight. For as long as you want." She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "Forever, then. I choose forever." As they drifted into sleep, wrapped in each other's warmth, neither of them noticed the distant lights moving across the horizon, lights that would soon shatter their peaceful world. The sound of engines woke them just before dawn. Darren felt VYX stiffen in his arms, her entire body going rigid with fear. He sat up, instantly alert, and moved to the window. 3 sleek ships hovered above the cliff, their hulls gleaming silver in the early morning light. They were unlike anything he'd seen, organic curves mixed with hard technology, utterly alien. "No," VYX whispered, scrambling from the bed and pulling on clothes with shaking hands. "They found me. They found me." "Who?" Darren demanded, though cold dread was already settling in his stomach. "My masters. The crew from the vessel. They must have survived the crash." Her voice broke. "They have come to take me back." A beam of light swept through the window, and a voice boomed from external speakers, the words translated into mechanical English. "The property designated VYX is detected within this structure. Surrender her immediately or face legal consequences under consortium law." Property. The word ignited something fierce in Darren's chest. He grabbed VYX's shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. You are not property. You're a person, and I will not let them take you." "You cannot stop them," she said, tears streaming down her purple cheeks. "Darren, you do not understand their power." "Then help me understand. But I'm not giving you up without a fight." A harsh knock rattled the lighthouse door. Darren descended the spiral stairs with VYX close behind him, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. When he opened the door, 3 alien figures stood there, 2 guards flanking what appeared to be an officer. They were tall, with grey-green skin and cold, reptilian eyes. "Human," the officer said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You are harboring stolen property. Surrender the servant VYX, and no charges will be filed against you." "She's not property," Darren said flatly. "She's a person who asked for sanctuary. Your primitive planet's laws do not apply. She is registered merchandise, purchased legally under consortium trade agreements. She must return to fulfill her contract." "I have no contract," VYX shouted, stepping forward. Her hands were shaking, but her voice held steady. "I was taken as a child. Sold. I never agreed to anything." The officer's expression didn't change. "Your agreement is irrelevant. Your species was conquered. The terms were set by your planetary government before your birth." "That doesn't make it right," Darren said, moving to stand beside VYX. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "And I won't let you take her." One of the guards raised a weapon. "You will not prevent." "Wait." The officer held up a hand, his eyes narrowing as he studied their joined hands, the way VYX stood close to Darren. "Is this human your bonded mate, VYX?" The question hung in the air. VYX looked at Darren, and he saw the calculation in her eyes, the desperate hope. But he also saw something else, the question of whether he truly meant what he'd said about forever. Darren squeezed her hand. "Yes," he said firmly. "She is." "Then I also choose him," VYX declared, her voice growing stronger. "Under consortium law, a servant may be released from service if they form a recognized pair bond with a citizen of a sovereign world. Earth is sovereign. I claim this right." The officer's expression twisted with frustration. "That law applies only to willing bonds, not coercion." "There is no coercion," VYX interrupted, and now her voice rang with newfound authority. "I choose Darren freely. I choose this life freely. Test me if you doubt it. The scanners will show my sincerity." A tense silence fell. The officer conferred with his guards in a harsh, clicking language. Finally, he produced a small device and scanned VYX. His face darkened as he read the results. "The bond registers as genuine," he said through gritted teeth. "However, this matter will be reviewed by the Consortium Council. Higher authorities will investigate this claim. If any deception is found, both of you will face severe penalties." "We'll be waiting," Darren said, though his heart pounded. The aliens retreated to their ships, which lifted away with a sound like distant thunder. Darren and VYX stood in the doorway, watching until they disappeared into the clouds. Only then did VYX collapse against him, her composure finally breaking. "What have we done?" she sobbed. "They will return with worse. They will find a way." "Then we'll fight again," Darren said, holding her tight. "Together. I meant what I said, VYX. All of it." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, both unable to sleep, VYX whispered the question that had become their ritual. "May I stay with you again tonight?" "Always," he answered, but now the word carried the weight of an uncertain future, of battles yet to come. The Consortium Council's representative arrived 6 weeks later, but she was nothing like the cold officers who had come before. Ambassador Thessia was elderly, with pale blue skin and kind eyes. She sat in Darren's lighthouse drinking tea, reviewing documents on a translucent tablet, while VYX gripped Darren's hand so tightly it hurt. "I have reviewed your case thoroughly," Thessia said finally, setting down the tablet. "And I have consulted with the Reformed Council, a body established just 2 cycles ago to address historical injustices." "Historical injustices?" Darren asked carefully. The enslavement of VYX's people, the Valorians, was based on a treaty signed under duress 3 centuries ago. Recent reforms have invalidated such contracts. She looked directly at VYX. "You are not property. You never were. Your people have been granted full citizenship status within the consortium, with all rights and protections." VYX made a strangled sound. "I am free. Completely. The vessel's crew has been sanctioned for failing to inform you of the reform, which was issued 8 months ago. They deliberately withheld information to maintain their labor force." Thessia's expression hardened. "They will face consequences." The weight that had pressed on them for weeks suddenly lifted. VYX began to cry, deep, shuddering sobs of relief. Darren held her close, his own eyes burning. "There is more," Thessia continued gently. "Earth has recently entered provisional partnership with the consortium. There are cities now where humans and other species coexist peacefully, with full legal protections for mixed relationships. You have options beyond this remote place." Over the following months, Darren and VYX made their decision together. The lighthouse had been a sanctuary, but it had also been a hiding place. They wanted to live, not just survive. They moved to New Haven, a coastal city where humanity's first real integration with alien cultures was taking place. Darren opened a bookshop specializing in both human and alien literature, a bridge between worlds. VYX enrolled in art school, her talent quickly recognized by professors who had never seen someone capture emotion in color the way she did. Their relationship deepened beyond crisis and survival into something richer. They learned to navigate cultural differences, to build a life together rather than just cling to each other. VYX made friends, other freed Valorians and humans who welcomed her. Darren rediscovered purpose beyond grief. VYX's art began to sell. Her paintings of Earth's oceans, seen through alien eyes, resonated with both species. She held her first gallery showing on a rainy evening that reminded them both of the day they'd met. Darren stood in the crowded gallery, watching her confidently discuss her work with admirers, and marveled at her transformation. That night, in their apartment overlooking the harbor, they celebrated. The windows were open to let in the salt air, and music played softly in the background, the same jazz that had accompanied their first dance. VYX came to him as he stood on the balcony, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Her black wavy hair tickled his neck. "1 year ago today," she said softly, "I collapsed at your door, certain I would die alone and afraid. And instead, you found me," Darren said, turning to face her. "Or I found you. I'm still not sure which. Both, perhaps." She smiled, that radiant expression that never failed to move him. "We found each other." He kissed her forehead. "Do you ever regret it? Staying with me instead of finding your people first, building that life?" "Never." Her voice was fierce with certainty. "You taught me I was worthy of love. You showed me what freedom truly meant. Everything else grew from that foundation." They stood together as the city lights twinkled below, two people from different worlds who had built something entirely their own. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and challenge, but they would face it together. VYX tilted her head back to look at him, her eyes dancing with familiar mischief. "Darren," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "May I stay with you again tonight?" It was their ritual, their private joke, their way of honoring where they'd begun. But now the question held no fear, no uncertainty, only love and chosen commitment. Darren pulled her close, kissing her with all the tenderness and passion that a year together had only strengthened. "Tonight," he murmured against her lips, "and every night after. For as long as you'll have me." "Forever, then," VYX whispered, echoing the promise she'd made in the lighthouse so many months ago. "I choose forever." And this time, they both knew that forever was not just a dream, but a future they would build together, one day, one choice, one shared night at a time. The city hummed with life around them, but in that moment, they existed in a world of two. Different species, different histories, but one love, genuine, hard-won, and absolutely real. The end.